Hi, I'm Morse, the founder of Core Elements Training. In this short video, I'm going to demonstrate tapotement massage techniques. Tapotement massage techniques are often referred to as percussion techniques because they do make a sound when you are applying the technique. They're useful for producing micro-contractions within the muscle tissue, which after you finish the technique, then stimulate a relaxation response in the muscle tissue. It's also useful for increasing localized circulation in the muscles that have been stimulated with the tapotement techniques. And it's useful for preventing against atrophy, where people may have been immobile for a period of time, which may be due to injury or illness. The tapotement techniques that we're going to cover include hacking, cupping, pounding, and slapping techniques. There are several other techniques as well which come under the bracket of tapotement. So we would generally have completed our effleurage and petrissage techniques before we start applying the tapotement techniques. Okay, so we have already pre-warmed up the muscles through the use of effleurage and petrissage. So I'm going to start with the hacking tapotement technique. So your body position should be in nice wide stance and almost in a squat position so that you can engage the abdominal muscles and keep the body in a nice tall position. So you're not rounding or straining yourself as you're applying the technique. Fingers are going to be open and our wrists are going to be loose. So quite often when you're learning this technique, it's useful to do air hacking first before going down onto the client's skin, because quite often as soon as you start touching the client, then quite often the wrist can become quite stiff. So we want the technique to be quite nice and loose. Okay, so your shoulders are nice and relaxed when you're doing this. Okay, so our hacking technique first of all. So we want to make sure that we're covering the whole of the tissue. So we're coming up the back of the hamstrings, we're coming to the lateral side of the hamstrings, and then we're also moving through the legs to cover the medial side of the hamstrings as well. One of the key features that you're looking for is that the tissue is jumping. So as I'm doing this technique, we can clearly see that the tissue is jumping. And because the tissue is jumping, we know that we have stimulated those micro-contractions. Okay, depending on the size of the client and the size of the tissue, you may only come down to the gastrocnemius and not necessarily cover the soleus. Okay, but if you've got somebody with a nice big calf, good muscle tone, then you can cover that soleus area as well. Okay, so we would miss out the back of the knee as we're working up the whole of the back of the leg. So I'm just going to demonstrate that again. So fingers nice and loose. Okay, nice floppy wrists as we're doing this. And we can clearly hear the sound. We're listening for the sound and we're looking for that jump in the tissue as well. And we're covering the whole of the muscle group. So the outside of the muscle, middle of the muscle or belly of the muscle, and the inside of the muscle as well. Okay, from this, in between those tapotement techniques, we would then effleurage, so we're flushing the tissue in between the techniques. The next technique that I'm going to demonstrate is cupping. So with our cupping technique, we need to make sure that our hands are engaged. So we're putting our hands into a position where we'd want to hold water. So if you imagine that you're holding water in the palm, you're gripping your thumb into the finger so that the muscles in the hand contract. And again, you're keeping nice floppy wrists as you're applying the technique to the tissue. So it's this part, or this sort of like cup area, that's going to make the sound when you're applying the technique to the client. Quite often when we're new to doing this technique, you'll have one hand that sounds like it's cupping and the other hand sounds like it's slapping. So if so, then just go back to the start, engage the muscles in the hand by pushing the thumb into the fingers, straight fingers, and you've got that well in your hand where you can hold your water. So you're creating a cup. Okay, so floppy wrists, again, sometimes start with that air movement or air cupping. Okay, and then we're coming onto the tissue. So again, like with the hacking, we're moving over the whole of that muscle tissue, trying to get that jumping and trying to listen for that suction sound. And then again, we could come over gastrocnemius, and depending on the size of the client, we could then also go over that soleus muscle too. We're avoiding back of the knee as we go back up the leg. So movement through the wrist and listening for that cupping sound. Okay, and then once you've finished, again, we're going to flush with that effleurage. Okay, when you're creating a massage routine, you might only do one or even two of those tapotement techniques. The next technique that I'm going to demonstrate is pounding. Okay, so with pounding, all of our tapotement techniques, we've got that floppy wrist and we've got loose hands. Apart from with the cupping, where we're purposefully engaging the muscles in the hands to create that cup area. Okay, pounding, it's loose fists. And if you imagine, like sometimes people might pound on the wall to create a sound, that's what we're going to be doing, but on the muscle tissue and with loose wrists and loose fists. Okay, so we're looking again for that jump. Okay, and it's a softer sound with pounding. We can still see that the tissue is jumping, and we're covering inside of the tissue, middle of the tissue, and the outside. We're avoiding back of the knee as we come up into the middle of the hamstrings or belly of the hamstrings, medial hamstrings, and lateral hamstrings. So it is quite relaxing for the client. So although this is a stimulatory technique, stimulating the muscle tissue, stimulating that local circulation, it's also quite relaxing for the client. Okay, and the final technique that we're going to demonstrate is slapping. So we're slapping, so trying to lift the tissue, and we're using the soft pad of the hands, okay? So it's the fingers that are creating an upward lift, okay? So we're trying to lift the tissue up as we do the movement. So one hand over the other hand, and it's a lifting, sweeping technique. Still producing micro contractions, still avoiding the back of the knee, which is the popliteal space. Okay, so we want to make sure this one sounds quite loud, again like with the hacking, and we're still covering all of that muscle tissue, okay, in order to stimulate it. But it does sound louder compared to that pounding technique, but we're trying to lift that tissue up and cover the whole of the area. So one hand over the other hand. Okay, so one of the things you might be able to see through the camera is that reddening response. That's quite common for all of the tapotement techniques, but more so you might see it more so with that slapping technique. That's erythema. So that shows that we've got that increase in localized blood flow. Okay, so then from there, as with those other techniques, we are going to flush through the area. If you've got a client that's quite sensitive to those techniques and finds them slightly uncomfortable, then we can do our tapotement techniques through a towel as well, especially when it comes to areas such as the glutes and to the back of the leg, which can sometimes be sensitive. So in this instance, make sure you're fully aware of where the back of the knee is, or that popliteal space. And then from here, We can then just apply that technique. We can still hear the sound. We can still see that the tissue is jumping, okay, as we're hacking over the gluteus maximus, okay, and over that hamstring area. And then we could do the whole of the back of the leg if we wanted to, using that towel where our clients are more sensitive. Again, just avoiding back of the leg and covering the whole of that area. Okay, so that was our tapotement techniques, which included our hacking, our cupping, our pounding techniques, and our slapping techniques. If you'd like to find out about more foundation massage techniques, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel where we might demonstrate further techniques such as effleurage and pétrissage techniques. If you'd like to find out more about our Level 3 Sports Massage Certificate course, then please visit our website, which is www.coreelements.uk.com. Thank you.